Based on your testing data, what trends are you seeing in the CBD and THC markets?
Well, definitely an increase in beverages, for sure, right? We'll probably see them all at ABC and all these different,
A lot.
you know, distributors, if you will. I see a lot of edibles, a real expansion in the consumption of edibles. I think different consumers in different markets, obviously, a soccer mom and, maybe some lawyers and things of that nature, don't really want to smell like cannabis throughout the day, but you can consume an edible or hit a vape pen and go about your day. But yeah, definitely edibles and beverages is kind of where we're seeing a spike in consumer production or consumption.
What is the ideal dosage for an edible or a beverage?
If you ask me, I'm a lightweight, right?
I think most people have a misconception that, let's go and take 50 milligrams, but once you go, there's no coming back. So that's what I'm saying. Like, what would be the ideal? Is it 5, 10 milligrams, 20?
I think it really, the consumer or patient's tolerance, right? Just like alcohol, right? Or have they consumed in the past? Is it their first time? I think the advice that I always give everyone in our friend group or anyone looking to consume is, titrate. Start small and work your way up.
Right.
Low and slow.
Low and slow.
Low and slow. And I think the issue is, everybody's got the story, right? Ate one gummy, waited 10 minutes, thought it was going to affect me, and took another gummy, and then 30 minutes later, bang, and then 15 minutes after that,
You're shaking under the covers.
Right, exactly, right? So, and I always tell everybody, do it in a setting that you're comfortable and do it at home. People want to take an edible for the first time at a party and, then they have a horrible experience and then you kind of lose that consumer long term. So, I tell everybody, do it at home, movie night or whatever with you and your partner. And, everyone that has done it, in that way usually has a positive experience. So, but yeah, start low and slow. And I think 5, 10, to answer your question, is probably the right space, unless you've been you're seasoned and you want to double up on your gummies.
Nice. Have consumer preferences changed in terms of cannabinoid profiles, potency, or product types?
We see we're seeing a big push in some markets for like exotics cannabinoids, right? So there's a typical list of like about 11 cannabinoids that everybody, for the most part, puts out on their reports. Some markets have a little bit of an extended list. But we are seeing requests to do more of these unique cannabinoids. Obviously, it impacts cost of testing significantly, right? But there are a lot of customers who are starting to the more data points you have, the better off you are. And I think that's kind of what everybody's looking into now. Are there cannabinoids that we're leaving on the table that have medicinal value? And if so, what are they?
What exotics are you seeing?
It's like THCP and actually, I could tell you. Hold on, let me pull up a list and I'll give you guys a quick little list.
And is it cannabinoids that you're exposed to depending on the temperature that you're vaporizing at? Because I've done a lot of research on cannabinoids, and essentially, so like THC burns off at 315, 320.
Sure.
But then there's exotics that once you're up in the 550 degrees, then you're starting to see those others.
And I think that's the idea, right? To be able to understand what's in the product and then follow it through the entire life cycle of the consumption of the product and see what type of medicinal or consumer benefit they're having to it. Some of the cannabinoids are like HHC, RNS, D9 THCP, D8 THCP, THCB as in boy, THCH, CBT, CBNO, D9 THCO, and D8 THCO, right? So those types of cannabinoids, and I think in the CBD hemp space, those cannabinoids are constantly changing, and then the products change, and that's like the main, selling point for a particular product. It's very difficult to play catch up in that space because they're constantly changing different cannabinoids. So being able to have this extended list, we can service a way broader audience of customers. So it's something that we're looking at.
So in the hemp space, you're saying different cannabinoids. Is that because of the genetics, that it's coming from different parts and it's coming with different cannabinoids, or?
I have no idea what's driving this, right? We're taking the inbound calls, and people want pricing, and the standards are expensive because they're not the mainstream top 10, 15 cannabinoids that everybody's using. So accessibility to them is minimal. There's only a handful of companies that offer them. And then the method development takes time, right? It takes, anywhere from 3 days to a week to develop a method and then verify, and then create an environment where you're actually in production and then have the volume to sustain, a $150,000 instrument that's running potency tests for a handful of samples. So, there's that element of it as well.
Are there any red flags consumers should be aware of when evaluating CBD or THC products in the market?
And the biggest thing is asking for lab results. I probably travel the U.S. for all of our states pretty often, and in smoke shops and in dispensaries, a lot of the times ask, the person behind the counter, do you have a copy of a COA for this product? And they look at me like I got 10 heads. Right, so I think making sure that the consumer understands that there needs to be testing, and unfortunately, on the hemp and CBD side, we do see a lot of doctored COAs where people are taking COAs, they go to PDF editor and they're changing results on it. So be aware, right? Use the brand, and that's really what we're trying to do. Is when people see the K from Kecha, they know that it's a reputable operator who's been in the space, who's in a bunch of states, who's got a lot of data. So a consumer can say, hey, let me get a COA, and they see our name and say, okay, I could trust this product, and I know it's been tested by a real lab.
How important is transparency in lab testing for consumers, and how does that shape their buying decisions?
I think it's huge. I think a lot of the times, customers will question results, and then the lab's like, well, it's going to take me a few hours, if not a day or so, to put together all this data. And it's almost like the customer gets fatigued. They don't want to wait, and the lab never comes forward with the documentation or the data, and then it's just leaving that lab and moving to another lab, and it's kind of like a repetitive cycle. We've built our system in a way where a customer requests chromatography and asks for data sets. It's literally a click of a button and it's gone. You got to be able to hold yourself accountable as well. On the lab side, people are still involved, mistakes happen, but working with the state and working with the customers in transparency is, I think, our biggest value add. We're here to definitely, again, lead through the data, but sharing that information.
That's great.